Senator Day, Senator Singh.
With the important meeting of the Paris talks, which begins today in Paris, to reach hopefully a global agreement on reducing greenhouse gas emissions on our planet, I really do hope, very much so, that Australia becomes a leading light. But unfortunately, I think my hopes perhaps won't be delivered. And I don't think they'll be delivered because we know that the government so far hasn't changed its stance from the Abbott government's position on climate targets, particularly the 26 to 28% emissions reduction target that it has set for itself, which does nothing, as we know the Climate Institute has shared, to reduce global warming by 2%. In fact, it only reduces, it's consistent with global warming of 3 to 4 degrees. Now, having said that, I do live in hope, and I also really hope that there are real gains made at this Paris summit. They may not be made by Australia, but I hope they are made by enough countries, the some 166 now, that have pledged their emissions reductions to ensure that we do come out with a very positive outcome. And of course, this summit, this Conference of the Parties 21 in Paris, has taken a different approach. It's taken an approach where countries pledge what they are able to contribute and then hope to obviously defend that as their reasonable contribution to limit global warming by 2 degrees. That is what needs to happen. We know that Australia's targets don't do that, but we are hoping that the outcome from other countries make that happen. For the opposition, however, we have put forward very much our position on climate change and renewable energy as a very positive one where we can actually make a difference. And over the weekend I noticed that the Prime Minister described Labor's plan to reduce Australia's 2030 emissions reduction and our policy to the next election of net zero pollution by 2050 as heroic. Well, I have to say I would much prefer to be on the side of heroism than I would on the side of failure. And unfortunately, unless the Prime Minister ignores his National Party colleagues who are urging him to certainly do less, not more, ignore Senator McDonald, Senator Day. I could go on with a number of senators and others in the other place that of the very conservative side of do-nothing approach, forget about humanity approach, then we won't have a strong outcome for this country out of this Paris summit. Having said that, there is a lot of goodwill, I know, very much so at this meeting, so that allows me to feel comfortable with the fact that other nations will hopefully do the right thing. Now, I've spoken in this place before, though, about the importance of the Asia-Pacific, particularly some of our Pacific Island neighbours, but also Asian countries as well, that will lead to sea level rises over the next decade or more, and how there is going to be a need with the Green Climate Fund to ensure there is support for our region. And that is why I also urge the Turnbull Liberal government to ensure it does increase its contribution to the International Green Climate Fund. That is at least one way we can hold our heads up high, even if they are not going to change their current emissions reduction targets, which so need to be changed. The Green Climate Fund, of course, is crucial and will be discussed and contributed to by a number of nations at this UN climate meeting, because the OECD has made it clear that it is some $30 billion short in its demand for developing countries to actually help them mitigate the impacts of climate change. It's very clear, and I guess I'm pointing this to some of those senators who tell us who take a different view to them to take a reality check. It is very clear that they need to take a reality check and read some of the science and some of the reporting that has been done in the area of global warming, and I'd like to point to one area, and that is sea level rises in the Asia-Pacific. The International Panel on Climate Change's most conservative estimates, indicate that sea level rises will rise on average at about 4 millimetres per year above 1990 levels by the period 2090-2099. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, what it means is that in Southeast Asia, another 250 million people, particularly in poor rural areas, who live in the low-lying river megadeltas of Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam, of which 2 million people are directly affected by the inundation of sea level rise by mid-century, will be affected. That is the reality check. That is what we are dealing with here. That is the result of global warming that has been caused by man-made influences through our activities that we need to slow and curtail, because it's already too late for so many of these poor people who live in these low-lying areas. Nowhere, I think, is the threat more imminent than in the Asian region, and that is why those small island developing countries in the Pacific, who are highly vulnerable to storm surges, to coastal erosion, to flooding, to inundation, need the support and the protection that we can provide, and that's what we can do through our contribution to the Green Climate Fund. So I urge our Prime Minister, while he is over there, to stay true to the position that he once held, and that is that, the direct action policy is a fig leaf, is a farce, is a recipe for fiscal recklessness on a grand scale. They are his words. Recognise that that is not the policy that he believes in, and that we need strong action on climate change to do our part when we make our limit of global warming to 2 degrees, in the hope that we can hold our heads up high for our sense of humanity.
Thank you, Senator.